The autumn wind rustled through the trees as I stood outside my parents' house, my hand frozen on the doorknob. I'd arrived early for Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd maintained despite my success, only to overhear the conversation that would change everything. "James is perfect for hosting Thanksgiving this year," my sister Amanda declared. "His house is massive and it's not like he has a family to worry about." "He does seem rather available," my mother agreed, her tone carrying that familiar mix of concern and judgment. 40 people should fit comfortably. I remained motionless, listening as my family carved up my Thanksgiving without bothering to consult me. Through the window I could see them gathered in the kitchen, Amanda, our mother, and my younger brother Michael Pick, all nodding in agreement as they planned to volunteer my time, my home, and my resources. "Did anyone actually ask James about this?" Michael's wife Sarah asked, her voice carrying a hint of concern. Amanda laughed. "Ask him. Why? He never has plans anyway. Besides, it's about time he contributed something meaningful to this family." I had to suppress a bitter chuckle at that last part. If they only knew about the trust fund I'd established for their children's education, or how I'd quietly purchased and forgiven their mortgage during the financial crisis last year. But that was my way. Helping from the shadows, never seeking recognition. "We'll need him to handle everything," my mother added. "The cooking, the cleaning, the setup. You know how particular Aunt Helen is about her holiday meals. And the kids can stay over at his place the whole weekend." Amanda chimed in. "Give us parents a break. His guest rooms are just collecting dust anyway." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, checking the confirmation $47,000 for the luxury villa in Bali already paid in full. First-class tickets booked. Private chef arranged. Everything was set for my own perfect Thanksgiving. One that had been planned months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they saw me as the lonely workaholic brother with the empty house, I'd built an empire in international real estate development. My modest 5-bedroom home was just one of 12 properties I owned globally. The company I'd founded, Kingston International, had just closed a $2.3 billion deal last week. Not that my family ever bothered to read the business section of the newspaper. "It's settled then," my mother declared. "We'll tell him at dinner tonight. He can't say no with everyone here." I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and finally opened the door. "Game time. James." My mother's face lit up with that particular smile she reserved for when she wanted something. "You're early, dear." "Traffic was light," I replied, hanging up my coat. The $3,000 Tom Ford jacket looked deceptively simple. Another part of my carefully cultivated image of modest success. The next hour unfolded exactly as I'd expected. Small talk over appetizers, carefully casual questions about my work, still doing that property thing, and pointed comments about family obligations. Finally, over the main course, they sprung their trap. "So James," my mother began, sharing a look with Amanda, "we've been thinking about Thanksgiving." I kept my expression neutral as they laid out their plans. 36 people, 4 days of hosting, multiple meals, childcare. The list of expectations grew with each passing minute. "It's perfect," Amanda concluded. "You have all that space, and this way everyone else can relax and enjoy the holiday." They all stared at me, waiting for my inevitable agreement. In the past I would have said yes. I'd always been the reliable one, the responsible brother who could be counted on to sacrifice his time and resources for family harmony. But something had shifted in me over the past year. Maybe it was watching Amanda and Michael take my generosity for granted one too many times. Maybe it was the realization that my silence about my success had enabled their presumptions. Or maybe I was just tired of being the family's convenient solution. "I'll have to check my calendar," I said mildly, taking a sip of water. "Check your calendar." Amanda's fork clattered against her plate. "What could you possibly have planned?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'll let you know by Wednesday." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of tense conversations and pointed looks. As I drove home that night, I finalized the last details of my plan. A quick call to my assistant confirmed everything was in place. Over the next 2 days, I watched the family group chat explode with Thanksgiving plans. Amanda shared Pinterest boards for decorations I was expected to provide. My mother sent detailed menu requirements. Michael's wife suggested activities for the children, activities I would apparently be supervising. Not once did anyone actually ask if I was willing or able to host. Wednesday morning, exactly 72 hours before Thanksgiving, I sent a simple message to the family group chat. Unfortunately, I won't be able to host Thanksgiving this year. I have other commitments. The response was immediate and explosive. What do you mean, other commitments? Amanda called within seconds. Exactly what I said, I replied calmly. I have plans. Plans. What plans? You never have plans. Her voice rose with each word. We've already told everyone you're hosting. All the arrangements are made. Arrangements you made without consulting me. I pointed out. I'm sorry if this causes any inconvenience, but I'll be out of the country for the holiday. The phone exploded with notifications, text messages, voice calls, even emails began pouring in. My mother called in tears. Michael sent angry paragraphs about family responsibility. Amanda's messages became increasingly hostile. I turned off my notifications and continued packing. That evening, as the family crisis reached its peak, I posted a single photo to my rarely used Instagram account. My first-class ticket to Bali, along with the reservation details for my private villa. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the question, how could I afford such a luxury trip? Why hadn't I told them about my travel plans? Who was I going with? I left them all unanswered. Thursday morning, as my family scrambled to reorganize their Thanksgiving plans, I boarded my flight. My phone contained dozens of missed calls and unread messages, including one final guilt trip from my mother. I hope you're happy ruining everyone's holiday like this. I settled into my first-class seat, accepting a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. On my laptop, I pulled up the latest report from Kingston International. The merger we'd been working on for months had just been approved. By the time I returned from Bali, my net worth would increase by another $500 million. My phone buzzed with one last message from Amanda. I just don't understand why you're being so selfish. This isn't like you, James. But that was where she was wrong. This was exactly like me. The real me they'd never bothered to know. The me who'd built an international empire while they assumed I was merely getting by. The me who'd chosen to stop enabling their presumptions and start living life on my own terms. As the plane took off, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about causing harm. It's about finally standing up for yourself. The next message I sent was to my assistant. Begin phase 2. It was time to show my family exactly who they'd been taking for granted all these years. But that revelation could wait until I returned from paradise. My phone buzzed again. A news alert this time. The merger announcement had gone public. My name and photo were splashed across the business section of every major news outlet. By the time my family sat down for their hastily reorganized Thanksgiving dinner, they'd be digesting more than just turkey. The plane climbed higher, leaving behind the city where I'd played the role of modest, reliable James for so long. Below, I imagined my family gathering for emergency planning sessions, scrambling to salvage their holiday plans. They'd be angry, frustrated, and confused, emotions they were used to causing in others, but rarely experienced themselves. But this was just the beginning. My Thanksgiving surprise was merely the appetizer. The main course, the full revelation of who I really was and what I'd achieved, would be served upon my return. As the coast disappeared beneath the clouds, I opened my laptop again. Time to review the documents my lawyers had prepared. After years of quietly managing my family's financial crises from the shadows, it was time for everything to come to light. Let them spend this Thanksgiving reflecting on how they'd treated their unsuccessful brother. By Christmas they'd be seeing me and themselves in a very different light. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and I reclined my seat. Ahead lay 2 weeks of peaceful luxury in Bali. Behind, a family learning their first lesson in consequences. Sometimes the biggest statement you can make is simply saying no. 3 days into my Bali vacation, the messages changed from angry to desperate. Did you really buy Pacific Crown properties? My brother texted, why didn't you tell us? I sipped my morning coffee on my private villa's deck, watching the sun rise. The $4.2 billion merger had made headlines, but that was just the beginning of their education. The infinity pool reflected the morning light. As I scrolled through the hundreds of missed calls and messages, my family had progressed through the stages of grief remarkably quickly: denial, anger, bargaining, and now they were somewhere between depression and acceptance. My mother's latest voicemail was particularly telling: James, darling, we had no idea you were so successful. Please call us back. We need to talk about this, about everything. Amanda's tone had shifted dramatically from her previous messages. Hey, big brother, I just saw you on CNBC. They're calling you the silent titan of real estate. Why didn't you ever say anything? Call me back, please. Even Michael, who'd spent years making snide comments about my modest lifestyle, had sent a series of increasingly humble texts. Man, I feel like such an idiot. All this time, we need to talk. I set my phone aside and opened my laptop to review the morning reports. Kingston International's stock had jumped 12% since the merger announcement. The business world was buzzing about the mysterious CEO who'd built a $4.2 billion empire without anyone noticing. My assistant Sarah had sent her daily brief. Your family has been calling the office non-stop. Your sister tried to schedule a meeting through the corporate line. Your brother showed up at headquarters, but was turned away by security. Your mother has been telling everyone at her country club about her brilliant businessman son. Should I continue maintaining radio silence? I typed a quick response. Yes, proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2 was already in motion. My lawyers had begun the process of transferring all the properties I'd secretly purchased for my family into their names. The house my parents lived in, the building where Amanda's boutique operated rent-free, Michael's bargain condo, all would soon be officially theirs, complete with documentation showing how long I'd actually owned them. Let them stew in that revelation for a while. A message popped up from my PR team. Good Morning News wants an exclusive interview. They've uncovered your history of anonymous charitable donations. How would you like us to proceed? I smiled, thinking of the children's hospital wing I'd funded in my late father's name, the scholarship program I'd established at our old high school, and the small businesses I'd saved during the pandemic, all done quietly without recognition. Decline the interview, I replied. But you can confirm the donations. My phone buzzed again. A message from Aunt Helen, the family matriarch whose opinion had always carried the most weight. James, I just read about everything you've done for the community. Your father would have been so proud. I'm ashamed we didn't see who you really were all these years. That one stung a bit. Dad had always believed in me, even when everyone else saw me as the reliable but unremarkable eldest son. He'd passed away believing I was just moderately successful, never knowing I'd already built an empire. A notification from my banking app caught my attention. Amanda was trying to access the trust fund I'd established for her children's education, money she hadn't known existed until yesterday. Michael had been Googling the value of his condo building. My mother had called her bank to inquire about the mortgage I'd paid off 2 years ago. The pieces were falling into place. My phone rang, on the private line. Only a handful of people had access to. It was Marcus, my CFO and oldest friend. The vultures are circling, he said without preamble. Your family's been reaching out to everyone they can think of to get to you. Your sister's husband tried to pitch a family investment opportunity to the board. I laughed. How did that go? About as well as you'd expect. But here's the interesting part. Your brother's been looking into your other properties. He found the house in France. Ah yes, the chateau I'd purchased last year, where I'd planned to spend Christmas. Another surprise for the family to digest. Let them look, I said. It's time they saw the whole picture. You sure about this, James? Once everything comes out. They wanted to see me contribute something meaningful to the family, I replied. Let's show them what that really looks like. After hanging up, I opened my email to find dozens of messages from extended family members, old friends, and acquaintances who'd suddenly remembered my existence. Each one expressed amazement at my success, offered congratulations, and not so subtly hinted at investment opportunities or job openings. The local news back home had picked up the story. Local business mogul's secret success read one headline. Kingston International CEO's humble origins declared another. My high school had already reached out about naming their new business center after me. A text from my mother, darling. Please. We're having a family dinner tonight. Everyone wants to apologize. We feel terrible about Thanksgiving. Let us make it up to you. I checked the time difference. They'd be sitting down to dinner right about now, probably with an empty chair at the table, discussing their absentee son brother whose face was suddenly everywhere. Time for the next move. I opened my laptop and sent a single email to my legal team. Execute all property transfers immediately. Send the documentation to each family member by courier. Priority overnight delivery. Then I drafted a message to the family group chat. Hope you're enjoying dinner. Check your mail tomorrow. Consider it an early Christmas gift. Within minutes my phone exploded with responses, but I'd already turned it off. From my villa's deck, I watched the sun set over the Indian Ocean. Tomorrow they'd receive thick envelopes containing property deeds, trust fund documents, and detailed records of every time I'd quietly stepped in to help them over the years. They'd learn about the college funds, the paid-off debts, the anonymous donations to their causes. But more importantly, they'd learn something about assumptions and gratitude. My assistant had already arranged my Christmas plans. 2 weeks at the chateau in France. The invitations would go out next week, after my family had time to process everything. They'd have a choice to make: continue taking me for granted, or acknowledge the reality of who I'd become. Either way, I'd finally stopped playing the role they'd assigned me. A gentle breeze carried the scent of tropical flowers. As I settled into my evening routine, somewhere across the ocean, my family was having a very different kind of dinner than they'd planned for Thanksgiving. Instead of directing me around my own kitchen, they were probably dissecting every interaction we'd had over the past decade, re-examining every assumption they'd made. My phone lit up with one final message before I turned it off for the night. From Sarah, my assistant. Phase 2 complete. All documents delivered for morning arrival. Phase 3 ready on your command. Phase 3 would have to wait. For now I had a massage scheduled, followed by dinner prepared by my private chef. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new revelations, new adjustments to the family dynamic. But tonight I would enjoy the peace I'd earned. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Back in my office after Bali, I watched the security feed as my family gathered in the lobby. "We demand to see him," Amanda shouted, waving the property deeds I'd sent. My mother clutched the mortgage documents, while Michael stared at the trust fund papers. I pressed the intercom. "Top floor. The guards will escort you up." The past week had been exactly as I'd expected. The courier-delivered documents had hit like a bombshell, exposing years of my silent financial support. Now they were here for answers. I straightened my Brioni suit and watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office as my family was escorted into the private elevator. Kingston International's headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of the city's most prestigious building, another detail I'd kept to myself all these years. "They're here," my assistant announced through the intercom. "Send them in." The door opened and my family stumbled in, looking completely out of place in my minimalist executive suite. Their expressions ranged from shock to awe as they took in the view, the artwork, and finally me behind my desk. "James," my mother breathed. "This is incredible. Have a seat." I gestured to the conference area. "I assume you have questions." Amanda clutched her property deed. "The boutique building. You've owned it this whole time." "All those times I complained about the landlord. You were complaining to me," I finished. "Yes. I bought it 5 years ago when the previous owner planned to triple your rent." Michael stared at the trust fund documents. "My kids' college, their future. You've been planning this since they were born." "Someone had to." My mother's hands trembled as she held up the mortgage papers. "The house, when we almost lost it during the recession. I couldn't let that happen," I said simply. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken revelations. Years of assumptions, judgments, and casual dismissals were being rewritten in their minds. "Why didn't you tell us?" Amanda finally asked. I leaned back in my chair. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have stopped volunteering my time, my home, my resources without asking? Would you have started seeing me as something other than the convenient solution to every family problem? They flinched at my words. The Thanksgiving ambush was the last straw, I continued. Not because you wanted me to host, but because you never considered I might have my own life, my own plans, my own success. We had no idea, my mother began. Exactly. You never asked, you never looked. You were too busy deciding who I was to see who I'd become. The city sprawled below us, a testament to the empire I'd built while they dismissed me as merely getting by. The chateau in France, Michael said suddenly. That's yours too. Yes, that's where I'll be spending Christmas. Their faces fell at the reminder of my holiday plans. Unless, I continued, reaching into my desk. You're interested in a different kind of family gathering. I pulled out 3 envelopes, thick cream-colored paper with gold embossing. These are invitations, 2 weeks at the chateau, private jets, personal staff, everything arranged. A chance to start over, to get to know each other as we really are. They stared at the envelopes, understanding the choice before them. But first, I said firmly, we need to establish some new boundaries. My assistant brought in coffee as I outlined my terms. No more volunteering my time without asking. No more assumptions about my availability. No more taking my generosity for granted. And one more thing, I added. Everything I've given you, the properties, the trusts, the financial support, it's all yours to keep. But going forward, you make your own way. I'll always be here to help in genuine emergencies. But the blank checks stop now. Amanda nodded slowly. We've been horrible to you, haven't we? Not horrible, I corrected. Just careless. And now you know better. My mother wiped her eyes. All these years you've been taking care of us. And we never. The past is past, I interrupted gently. What matters is what happens next. I handed them the invitations. Christmas in France. A fresh start. Your choice. They took the envelopes with shaking hands. The jets leave in 3 weeks, I said, standing. Let me know your decision by next Friday. As security escorted them out, I watched them through the windows, huddled together, clutching their invitations like golden tickets. They looked small from up here, smaller still as they emerged onto the street below. My phone buzzed, another message from Aunt Helen. You've taught them all a valuable lesson, James. Your father would be proud of how you handled this. Maybe she was right. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally being seen for who I really was. I opened my laptop to check the chateau preparations. The staff was ready, the decorations ordered, the chef's menu planned. Whether my family accepted the invitation or not, I would have the Christmas I chose, not the one they prescribed for me. As the sun set over the city, I smiled. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the chance to see you clearly, even if it takes a multi-billion-dollar revelation to clear their vision. The chateau glowed with holiday lights as the family cars pulled up. Watching from my study, I saw their jaws drop at the medieval grandeur. Welcome to my real life, I whispered, heading down to greet them. The next 2 weeks would either heal our family or break it completely. Snow dusted the ancient stones as my family stepped into the grand entrance hall, their eyes wide at the 30-foot Christmas tree and crystal chandeliers. The staff stood at attention, ready to escort them to their suites. This is incredible, Amanda whispered, clutching her husband's arm. Your rooms are prepared, I said, descending the main staircase. Take time to settle in. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. They followed the butler silently, still processing the reality of their surroundings. I'd arranged everything perfectly, each suite personally decorated, every detail considered. This wasn't just a holiday, it was an education. At dinner, seated at the long mahogany table, the awkwardness was palpable. Crystal glasses clinked, silver scraped on fine china, but conversation was sparse. Finally, Michael broke the silence. I found my company's loan papers in my suite. Yes, I replied, sipping my wine. Consider it a Christmas gift. Your startup is now debt-free. But why? He asked. After how we treated you. Because you're family. That never changed. What needed to change was how you saw me, and how you treated me. My mother dabbed her eyes with a silk napkin. We've been such fools. No, I corrected. You just never looked past what you expected to see. The next days unfolded like a dream. Morning walks in the frost-covered gardens, afternoons exploring the chateau's wings, evenings by roaring fires. Slowly the tension melted. Real conversations emerged. I always thought you were just getting by, Amanda admitted one evening. I never imagined. You never asked, I reminded her gently. None of you did. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow. The chateau's chapel bells rang across the valley as we gathered for dinner. This time the silence was comfortable, filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. I have one final surprise, I announced, distributing envelopes. Inside each was a document showing my latest investment, a family foundation, funded with $50 million, to be managed jointly. This time I said, we do it together, transparently, as equals. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We don't deserve you. It's not about deserving, I replied. It's about growing, learning, changing. As midnight approached, we stood on the chateau's terrace, watching snow fall on the French countryside. The old year was ending, and with it our old patterns. Next Thanksgiving, Amanda said suddenly, let us host. As a thank you, I smiled. I'd like that. But please, just ask next time. The chapel bells tolled midnight, as we raised our champagne glasses to new beginnings, to real family, to finally seeing each other clearly. Sometimes the greatest gifts aren't wrapped in paper, but in understanding. Looking at my family's faces in the Christmas lights, I knew we'd turned a corner. The power dynamic had shifted, but something better had taken its place. Respect, appreciation, and genuine connection. Merry Christmas, I said softly, as the snow fell around us. This time when they hugged me, it wasn't out of obligation or necessity. It was out of love, and finally understanding. The end.